They told the world the boat was sinking. They told the world they ran for help. And tonight, the paperwork says that when they made that desperate call for rescue, their boat had not moved a single inch. Not one. For 5 straight hours. Y'all, the Nolan Wells case just cracked wide open. And what I'm about to walk you through is not speculation, it's not a theory, it's not somebody's cousin's Facebook post. It is the official record. GPS data. Timestamps. Coordinates read out loud on a recorded emergency line. And when you put the documents next to the story these young men have been telling, one of them does not survive. By the time this video is over, everything you thought you understood about the day Nolan Wells disappeared is going to be sitting in a pile on the floor. The departure time you keep hearing? Gone. The photos they keep waving around? Different story entirely. The frantic emergency call? Wait until you see where the boat actually was when that phone got picked up. So lock in. Because we're starting at the very beginning. Now before we get into the documents we have to talk about what happened on Nancy Grace because what happened on Nancy Grace is the reason any of this matters. The attorneys for the 3 young men who were on that boat with Nolan Wells, Warren, Morgan and Jax, decided to go on national television and defend their clients. And listen, I want to be fair here. Going on Nancy's show takes nerve. Nancy is a former prosecutor. Nancy has been cross-examining people since some of these lawyers were in grade school. She does not do softball. She does not do press releases read out loud. And if you walk into her house unprepared, she will fold you up like a lawn chair and set you on the curb. That is exactly what happened. Because Nancy asked them one simple question. 1. She looked at the photos they've been passing around, the photos that supposedly show the boat out on the water, the photos that supposedly prove their timeline, and she asked, is there a timestamp? When was this taken? Where was this taken? That's it. That is the question. That is the question any first-year law student would ask. That is the question any detective would ask in the first 30 seconds of an interview. That is the question you would ask if your own cousin showed you a photo and said, trust me. And these attorneys, grown men, officers of the court, men who have spent weeks threatening to sue half the internet for talking about their clients, could not answer it. Watch how it goes because the sequence matters. Nancy asks about the timestamp. One lawyer says, well, we don't think you're accusing us of lying. Sir, nobody asked if your feelings were hurt. Nancy says, I didn't ask that. When was the video taken? And the room gets quiet. That kind of quiet that tells you everything. Then another voice jumps in fast around 4:30 July 4th. Remember that. 4:30. Write it down. Put a pin in it, circle it in red, tattoo it on the inside of your eyelids because that number is about to become the most important number in this entire case. Then the attorneys pivot to their witnesses. We have multiple witnesses, they say, but we're going to protect their names. We are not going to name them on the air. And Nancy, to her credit, says I'm not asking you for names. I'm asking for the time. She says it more than once. She gives them chance after chance, the way a good prosecutor does, handing out rope with a smile. And one of them, I could not believe this, one of them finally says that's not our burden. Sir, you walked onto a national show, held up a photograph, and said this proves my client is innocent. The moment you did that, the burden walked in the door and sat down next to you. You brought the burden. The burden is yours. You do not get to introduce evidence and then act offended when someone asks when it was taken. That's not persecution. That's Tuesday in any courtroom in America. And the deflection kept going. At one point, an attorney actually tries to tell Nancy that her question isn't relevant because, and I'm paraphrasing, they didn't make the video themselves. Do you understand how wild that is? The video is good enough to clear your clients but not good enough for you to know anything about it. You're willing to use it as a shield, but the moment someone asks where the shield was forged, suddenly nobody in the room has ever seen a blacksmith. Nancy called it what it was. She said, you showed me the video, that's why I'm asking. And they still couldn't give her a straight answer. These are the men who say they're coming for every creator, every commentator, every person with a ring light and an opinion. Y'all, they can't even come for a timestamp. And here's the part that had me staring at my screen. After all that stumbling, after all that deflecting, one of the lawyers finally says the video was taken around 4:30. And the way he said it, fast like ripping off a bandage, like if he said it quick enough nobody would examine it, told me everything. Because I have the documents. I went and pulled the records. And what the records say about 4:30 is going to rearrange this whole case. So let's go to the audio. Because before the lawyers, before the photos, before any of it, there was a phone call. A call to the boat towing service made from the water, and it is recorded, and it is documented, and the time on that call is approximately 4 o'clock in the afternoon. 4 p.m. Keep that number next to the other one. Now on that call, the young man on the phone tells the operator they need help. And the operator, and this woman deserves a medal, because she is the only person in this entire story who did her job with precision, The operator starts taking down their position. She asks if everybody on board is okay. She asks if they need the Coast Guard. He says no. Think about that. A boat in distress and they decline the Coast Guard. Then she asks for GPS coordinates. And listen to what happens. He gives her a set of numbers. And she pauses. She says, "You're breaking up a little, can you repeat that?" Now why would she do that? Operators don't ask you to repeat numbers for fun. Operators don't slow down an emergency call because they feel chatty. She asked because what he gave her did not make sense for what he was describing. Something was off and she caught it in real time. So he gives the numbers again. 30 degrees, 14.684 north. 88 degrees, 46.79 west. And this operator, this absolute professional, looks at her screen and says, "Looks like you're on Horn Island, correct? Are you on the island?" And he says, "Yeah." Now stop. Stop right there. Because the next exchange is the one that made me sit straight up in my chair. She asks him, "Is the boat aground?" Do you know what that question means? That question means her screen is telling her that vessel is sitting on land, or in water so shallow it might as well be land. She didn't ask, "Is your boat sinking?" She asked, "Is it aground?" That's not a guess. That's a woman reading coordinates off a screen, and watching them argue with the story in her ear. And he says, "No, we're not aground, we're in 31 feet of water." 31 feet of water. At 4 p.m. Remember that he said that. Because now I'm going to show you the document that takes that statement and breaks it over its knee. I went through the official channels, the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, the incident reports, the data that comes off that vessel's own positioning system. And for those who don't know how this works, modern marine GPS doesn't wait for you to tell it where you are. It pings. Constantly. Automatically. The same way your phone knows when you left work and when you got home, the same way a location app drops a pin every time you move. That boat was announcing its position all day long whether those boys wanted it to or not. You can rehearse a story. You cannot rehearse a satellite. And here is what the official record shows. The vessel arrived at the western tip of Horn Island at approximately 11:15 in the morning. From 11:15 a.m., that boat sat in one stationary position. The GPS drop points are consistent with a vessel that is not moving. Anchored, moored, beached, whatever word you want to use, the boat is parked. From 11:15 in the morning until 4:30 in the afternoon. 5 hours and 15 minutes. Stationary. And then at 4:31 p.m., the record shows the vessel departing the west tip of Horn Island, heading north at a speed between 4 and 6 knots, traveling roughly 2 3/4 miles. Read that back with me. The boat did not move until 4:31 p.m. Now, the call for help, the call where the young man swears they are in 31 feet of water, that call was placed at 4 o'clock. 4 p.m. 31 minutes before the boat moved. So let me ask the question that should keep every defense attorney in this case awake at night. How do you call for a tow at 4 p.m., claiming you're out in open water taking on water in 31 feet of water, when your own boat's GPS says that at 4 p.m. you had been sitting parked at Horn Island for the last 5 hours? You can't. You can't be in both places. The water can't be 31 feet deep and beached at the same time. One of these things is the truth and the other one is a story. And y'all, it gets worse because now think about what they told us about that day. The whole reason for the frantic call, the whole reason for the drama, was that the boat was in trouble. Taking on water. An emergency. That's what justified everything that came after. But put that claim up against basic seamanship. Any boater on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, and that community knows its water, those people are born on boats, any boater will tell you the same thing. If your vessel is taking on water, you do not point it at the open ocean. You do the opposite. You ground it. You beach it. You get to the shallowest, safest water you can find and you wait for help. Every basic boating course teaches this. If you run a compromised hull into deep water and it goes down, you don't have a repair anymore. You have a total loss sitting on the bottom of the sound. Running a compromised boat across 10 miles of open water isn't a rescue plan. It's a sinking plan. It's how you turn a bad afternoon into a catastrophe. So the story was, emergency, we're sinking, send help. And the action was, sit parked at the island for 5 hours, make one phone call, wave off the Coast Guard, then casually cruise north at 4 to 6 knots, which for the record is a jogging pace on water. Does that sound like a sinking vessel to you? Does that sound like panic? Or does it sound like something else? And here's another detail the local boating community has been loud about. 4th of July at Horn Island is not a deserted beach. It is one of the busiest boating weekends of the year down there. Boats anchored side by side, families, music, grills, coolers. Gulf Coast boaters are a tight community, and they look out for each other. Because everybody out there knows the water doesn't care who you are. If a boat in that crowd had genuinely been going down, There would have been a dozen people tossing them lines before the bilge alarm finished its first scream. There is no version of that crowded anchorage where a boat quietly takes on water and nobody notices, nobody offers help, nobody comes forward afterward. Nobody saw a thing. Because, and hold this thought, maybe there was nothing to see. Now let's talk about the photos. Because the photos are where the story goes from inconsistent to impossible. The attorneys went on television and held up images. Look, they said. Look at these pictures. This is the boat out on the water that day. Nolan's not on it, the timeline works, the boys are innocent, case closed, everybody go home. And the internet looked at those photos, and the internet, because the internet never sleeps and never forgets, started noticing things. First, the clothes. In the images that keep circulating, the young men on that boat are wearing swim trunks that do not match what they were documented wearing that day. Different colors. Different gear. A hat that appears in one set of images that doesn't exist in the other. People who were there have been saying it for weeks. And before anybody says so what, y'all, this is not a fashion critique. Clothing is a timestamp. Clothing is how you prove a photo belongs to a specific afternoon. And let's not forget the darkest detail in all of this. When Nolan was found, he was reportedly wearing black swim trunks. So the colors people wore that day are not trivia. They are evidence. If the picture was really taken at 4 p.m. on July 4th during the emergency call, then the people in it should be wearing exactly what they were wearing every other minute of July 4th. And they're not. And if they're not, then somebody has to explain what day those pictures are actually from, and why they got presented to the public as July 4th. Second, whose boat the picture was taken from. The angle on the key image, the one showing the boat out in open water, was shot from another vessel. A vessel belonging to a man named Bart, who later helped tow them. People who know the boats down there say you can even spot Bart's brother in the frame, which means that photo by definition was taken during the tow. After the departure. After 4:31. And if the photo was taken after 4:31, then it can't be evidence of where they were at 4. It's evidence of where they were a half hour later than when the emergency call was made. The attorneys held up a photo to prove the 4 o'clock story, and the photo itself is timestamped by its own existence to after 4:30. You don't need to take my word for it. The geometry of the shot does the talking. Do you see it now? Do you see why they got so itchy when Nancy asked about timestamps? It's not that they couldn't find them. It's that the timestamps are the enemy. The timestamps are the one witness in this case that can't be coached, can't be threatened with a lawsuit, and can't be put on a GoFundMe. Every timestamp in this case, the call log, the GPS ping, the tow, every single one of them points the same direction. And it's not the direction these boys have been pointing. And that attorney sitting across from Nancy finally spitting out around 4:30 like it burned his mouth? He wasn't giving her the video's timestamp. He was accidentally giving her the departure time. He told the truth by accident, and the truth is 31 minutes too late for their story. And one more thing about that 4:31 departure that nobody is talking about. The record says they headed north at 4 to 6 knots. North is toward the mainland, toward the marina, toward help, toward home, toward dry land. So even in their moment of supposed emergency, the one direction they did not go was away from safety, which tells you that somewhere on that boat, somebody still trusted that hull more than the story says they should have. Now I already hear the pushback loading up in the comments, so let's handle it. Could the GPS be wrong? These systems log position constantly, and multiple data points over 5 hours all say the same thing. One bat ping is a glitch. 5 hours of bat pings is not a glitch, it's a location. Could they have called from a different boat? Then produce that boat, its owner, and its log. Could the times in the report be off? The call log and the vessel record are two separate systems kept by two separate entities, and they interlock like teeth on a zipper. At some point, coincidence stops being an explanation and starts being a crutch. And let me be honest with you about something else. Nobody wants to be wrong about this case. Not me, not you, not anybody. If some piece of paper shows up tomorrow that fixes their timeline, I will sit in this chair and walk it back in front of everybody. That's the deal. We follow documents, not teams. But the documents that exist today all lean one way, and pretending otherwise doesn't make you fair. It makes you blind on purpose. There is a difference between waiting for evidence and hiding from it. Let me be very careful and very clear here, because words matter and lawsuits are apparently flying around this case like mosquitoes in July. I am not telling you what happened to Nolan Wells. I don't know, and neither do the people screaming the loudest. What I am telling you is what the paper says. And the paper says the story we've been sold, sinking boat, frantic call, open water, 4 p.m., cannot physically coexist with the official GPS record of that vessel. At best, these young men were so impaired or so confused that their account of the most important day of their lives is worthless. At worst, the story was built, constructed, assembled after the fact from photos taken at the wrong time wearing the wrong clothes shot from the wrong boat. And if the timeline of the rescue call was staged, then every single person watching this has the right to ask, what else was staged? What happened in those 5 hours when that boat sat parked at Horn Island, in a crowd of people with Nolan Wells aboard, the hours nobody wants to put a timestamp on? Because that's the real question hiding under all of this. It's not the 31 minutes between 4 and 4:31. It's the 5 hours before it. 5 hours, one spot, and at the end of it, a young man is gone, and the people who were with him can't keep their story alive for a single round of questions on cable television. And if everything they've told the public was innocent confusion, there is a very simple way to prove it. Hand over the raw files. Hand over the metadata. Hand over the timestamps Nancy asked for on live television. Innocent people don't protect timestamps. Timestamps protect innocent people. And I want to say one more thing about Nolan because he gets lost in all the noise and he shouldn't. Nolan Wells was 18 years old. A football player. A son. He went out on the water for the 4th of July, the way thousands of kids do every summer, and he did not come home. And whatever these documents end up proving, whatever these lawyers end up explaining, the reason we pull the records and check the timestamps and ask the rude questions is him. Somebody was on that boat with him. Somebody knows what those 5 hours looked like. And every contradiction we nail down is one less place for the truth to hide. So here's where I land. The record shows a boat parked from 11:15 to 4:30. A distress call at 4 claiming 31 feet of open water. A departure at 4:31. Photos shot from a towboat wearing the wrong day's clothes. Attorneys who melted down over the word timestamp. You don't need a law degree to read that. You need a clock and a map. And now I want to hear from you because I already know this comment section is about to be a war zone. Number 1. Do you buy that these photos were just mislabeled? Or do you think they were presented on purpose? Number 2. If the GPS says they were parked during the distress call, what do you think that call was really about? And number 3, and answer this one honestly, should investigators bring these young men in separately and get every timeline on the record under oath, yes or no? Drop your answers below, pin your best theories, and if you've got local knowledge of Horn Island or that Anchorage that weekend, I want it in the comments. I'm going live later to go through all of this document by document, timestamp by timestamp, and there is at least one more detail in this record, something about what happened after the tow that I have not shown you yet. So subscribe, turn the bell on, and don't let anybody tell you this case is cold. Because the paper doesn't lie. And tonight the paper just started talking.